Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And we have returned. We are back from, well, not quite the dead, but we are back from sickness and marriage. Not at the same time. Well, actually, partially at the same time. But we're back, everybody. We had, as you know from the update from this week, or this past week, or whenever the hell we did it, I got married, yay me, Rob got sick, and I got sick, and the missus got sick. Not at the same time. We are not in a throuple. I know how that sounds. That is not the case. Rob has a loving family and of his own, and I do not meddle with it, nor does he meddle in mine, and we like it that way. It's okay if you're in a throuple, nothing wrong with that. Go have threesomes to your heart's content. But we are not. All right, and we've already blown this one. We're canceled already. Good job. Happy October, everyone. We're sorry that we haven't had the time because of, well, being sick, basically.
Yeah. I work in healthcare, and literally everybody in the world is sick right now, so it's going around.
Yeah, everybody I know is getting sick, except for the people who have gotten better, and then they were sick.
It's funny because no one has COVID. It's all something else. Like everybody I talk to that is sick, it's like no one is testing positive for COVID anymore. Now it's just like they're getting all the shit that nobody got for 2 years because we were wearing masks.
Yeah, everybody just had a bad cold.
Yep.
I had a bad cold. She had a bad cold. Actually, her cold was okay because she's off Sundays and Mondays. So so the day that she was starting to feel like fairly sick, she had off anyway. So
yeah.
she just slept for 2 days straight and just took a bunch of naps and got her 8 hours of beauty rest, and she was fine within like 2.5 days. But of course, I had to suffer on my week back to work from our lovely honeymoon in Aruba, which was nice. But we also had some stomach bugs there the first day, so the first day wasn't great, but we were fine the next day.
Tip, never drink the water in Aruba.
Oh no, it wasn't from the water.
Okay, good.
Yeah, they actually bottle their own water. Supposedly it's clean enough where it's fine. But no, it has nothing to do with the water. We just both...
It happened to my mom when we went to Aruba.
That's no good.
She got some stomach bug for like a day.
Yeah, all right. So maybe it was just being on a plane.
Could be.
Well, anyway... we are here to talk about Type O Negative and Carnivore. We're going to talk about some music today. This is a nice, good music episode. We haven't really done one since the Fat Boys, which that was a fun one in itself.
Yeah.
But Type O Negative and Carnivore, they're music that has been near and dear to our heart. Oh, by the way, I forgot the segue. That's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. Let's get on with the goddamn show. There we go. Hey, everybody. Sounds like back. It's back. All right. 50,
we're back.
How many episodes have we done? 50-something of these, 60-something of these, and I have not skipped a beat the entire time, and I do not plan to. I believe this is our 70th episode. Too bad I forgot to do a 69 joke for the BioShock one, but that's okay.
You know what? It's fine. That's lowbrow humor. We're here to do a little bit more sophisticated.
Oh, yeah, because we're classy.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. But Type O Negative, like I was saying, it's a band that's near and dear to our hearts. Mine especially because I grew up in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I still live in Brooklyn, but I grew up in Brooklyn and I lived fairly close to where Peter Steele lived. I went to high school. This girl who was a good friend of mine. We've kind of lost touch a bit over the years, but she's an EMT And, well, I don't know if he's still there, but she was an EMT with Josh Silver when he quit music altogether.
Oh.
So I never got a chance to meet him, but we've spoken about him at length several times. And she showed me a clipping from like the newspaper, because there was one time where we were talking about Typo Negative. I think we were getting Brennan in car, and it was maybe like after he had been doing it for about a year. And we were talking about Typo Negative, and she was like, "Oh, do you know Joshua?" And I was like, I don't know, who's Joshua? And she sent me, she just showed me an article in the newspaper, something that she had in the car. It was like the local news. And there was a picture with just all of them, whoever it was that they saved with the Jaws of Life or whatever they did. And, there's everybody else, and there's this very tall, skinny man with tattoos and a shaved head. And I only recognized certain tattoos, and I was like, wait, is that Josh Silver? And she's like, yeah, I thought you might know Joshua. I'm like, I don't know him, but you call him Joshua? And she's like, that's what he likes to be called. And I was like, he does? She's like, yeah, I can't believe he shaved his head. I'm like, did he go bald? She's like, no. Like, he just shaved his head by choice? She's like, yeah, he's kind of just done with that whole thing. So, and he wanted to be an EMT because he wanted to help people. I'm like, that's very noble of him.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have met him. I just never got the chance.
Apparently, it was also his plan B to support his wife and children. So.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean,
good for him.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, I've either met, run into, or have some kind of a connection through other people with all of them. It's really interesting. But I guess that could show you just, how small it really, like, that whole, like, New York music scene really is.
Yeah. Well, especially, in Brooklyn, it's very, like, tight-knit neighborhoods and stuff. And so, it's not uncommon to, like, run into people like that grew up in your, around your area.
Yeah. But it's a whole weird thing. Because my first, I only had one, but my guitar teacher, Stan Pillis, who I still speak to every now and then, he lives in Texas now, but he was a founding member of Carnivore when they were Fallout and they became Carnivore and everything. I believe he's on the demos. He was there for a while, but he was still friends with them throughout the whole thing. Mm-hmm. He was interviewed in the book. Paul Bento used to teach guitar at Norm's Music, which had been on Kings Highway for a very long time, like 50-something years, even longer. Mm-hmm. He moved. I think he lives in Chicago. I'm not even sure, but he moved. He was the Carnivore guitar player when they did the reunion, and he's also a fellow lefty. He is a sitar player. He played sitar on Typo Negative's Bloody Kisses, and he's a very cool guy. I haven't spoken to him in a number of years, but yeah, he's a cool guy. I bumped into Johnny Kelly at a Sam Goody in high school with my first girlfriend. Not that we dated very long, but we went into Sam Goody in the Kings Plaza Mall, which, if you even know what that was, then you're old.
It was the greatest place around.
Sam Goody was pretty damn good. It
was good.
It was not just a clever name. It was pretty damn good.
No,
but yeah, we went in there because we needed time to kill, and there was nothing else to do. I mean, what do you really do when you're 15 years old? We went into Sam Goody. She bought me a Black Sabbath CD, and Johnny Kelly is like right behind us, just like buying something else, or just like checking in to see what sold from like the Typo catalog that week. I don't know if he was checking the numbers or what, but he was there for whatever reason. She noticed before I did. And she kind of freaked out, and I hadn't yet gotten into Typo Negative, so I didn't know who it was, but I knew it was someone.
Yeah.
And then she told me later, and I was like, oh, that's pretty damn cool. When I worked at a Sam Ash, I sold well, I sold some kind of pro audio gear to Kenny Hickey.
Mm-hmm.
He popped in with his daughter Megan, and he bought stuff, and I rang him up at the end, and he was cordial. We had just like a very basic, standard conversation. Nothing important, but it was kind of cool. And Peter Steele, I had bumped. I saw him a couple times in my neighborhood, just buying groceries, or just like I ran into him on the train one time. I never spoke to him. But I saw him around here and there, and it was kind of cool. I always wanted to talk to him, but I just, it was one of those things where I didn't know what to say, so I didn't want to seem like an idiot, and two, I just kind of just want to leave people alone. Like he's probably got enough of people bothering him.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting how you just happen to run into certain people, and it's just kind of like, and I feel like had I never listened to metal, none of this would have ever happened. I feel like it never would. Like I don't know. I feel like it's a weird thing that you're interconnected. But anyway, I've run into them, or have known people involved in that whole community. I also worked at the Sam Ash where Typo Negative used to buy all their stuff, and for a number of years they had, like, when they got platinum, when Bloody Kisses went platinum, they had a bunch of platinum and gold records that they could just, apparently you could just get a bunch of them, you could just order a bunch of them from the label, or the label could order a bunch of them, and they could just give it to people to just, as like tokens of appreciation. So for a number of years, there was a platinum Bloody Kisses or a platinum Mortal Kombat soundtrack, which had Typo Negative on it.
That's amazing.
In the manager's office. It was gone by the time I was working there, but it's just funny. Apparently, the guy who was the general manager at the time thought that it was a gift for him, or he claimed that he thought that it was a gift for him, but he knew what he was doing, and he like took it when he left. I can't blame him. I probably would have done the same thing, to be honest. And yes, that's blatant thievery for those of you in digital media device land. I understand the ramifications of blatant thievery, but I did not commit this blatant thievery. Whomever the GM of that store at the time is the blatant thief. And I am just merely speculating from someone who would be in a similar situation. I can't say I blame him for committing that act of blatant thievery.
Yeah.
But yes, it is very interesting. And we too have been touched in a very bad way by Typo Negative. Yeah. Why don't you tell the story? I want to get some water.
All right, so yeah. So you introduced me to Typo Negative and to Peter Steele and Carnivore like a long time ago. It was like, it had to be like right after we had like first met. So I'm going to say like early 2010. And when we started the band, when we were called Zamboni, back before the lawyers got involved, we were actually going to do a Typo Negative cover. Or no, not a Typo Negative. We were going to do a Carnivore cover. We were going to cover Jesus Hitler. And so I had started listening to them, Carnivore, and then I started learning the song, and I was listening more and more, and then
I think I gave you the CD, or I brought the CD.
You gave me a whole bunch. I think you either that or you like just gave me like a whole like CD with like a whole bunch of music on it, and then like, or like you like plugged in your like.
I think I plugged in my MP3 player and put on like Carnivore and Typo Negative or something.
Yeah,
because I think when I was telling you the idea of that I had for the band, I think I was like, I'd like it to be a combination of this and Carnivore, and I think you were like, who's Carnivore, and I put them on. And I think that's what happened. And then I was like, oh, he was the guy in Typo Negative also. And then we put on Typo Negative. Maybe it was that. I don't remember for sure.
It was something along those lines, basically. Like it
occurred during a drive.
Yeah, and I definitely got into Carnivore first because we were learning Jesus Hitler, so like I listened to the whole album while I was learning Jesus Hitler, basically. The second album, Retaliation, and so I really was into them, and then you gave me like that whole thing of like Typo Negative stuff, and then I started listening more to that. And I remember like the first song that I really got into with Typo Negative is probably the one that everybody gets into with Typo Negative, and of course that was Black Number One.
I remember in the good old days when VH1 Classic was I don't even know if it's still a channel, but
I don't think it is.
I remember every Saturday they would put on the Metal Mania show, and they would just show a bunch of music videos, and I distinctly remember the Typo Negative videos coming on.
Yes.
And I did like that. I think I first got into Typo Negative. I think I borrowed high school. I think I borrowed high school from a person. You
borrowed the whole high school?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, we were well off. There was a girl in my drama club that had a bunch of CDs, and I borrowed them from her. Yeah. She's a man now. I haven't spoken to her in many years, but I found out through the grapevine that I think she's trying to. I think he's either a cop or is an aspiring police officer. And yes, interesting times. But she had a bunch of CDs, and Typo Negative happened to be one of them, and I checked it out, and I remember not being crazy about it at first. I didn't mind it. I was like, oh, this is cool. But I remember out of all the songs that that were on, of course, the album that she had was Bloody Kisses.
Yeah.
I didn't really care for the slower songs because I only really enjoyed rather faster songs. And I ended up really liking Kill All the White People. It basically became my favorite song overnight, and just like an anthem in my regular rotation. And I went to, and the high school that I went to was Lincoln High School, and it was not very white.
Yeah.
To say the least. And I remember, I was quite mischievous. I would write metal lyrics on the desks in pencil, specifically because I knew that the janitors or somebody would eventually erase it, and so that I could write it again. Because why would I do it in pen? You could only do it once if you do it in pen. So I kept doing that. And one of the songs of my rotation that wasn't a Slayer song that I was writing to freak people out was, it was Kill All the White People.
Yeah.
And I remember people looking at it who were not white, and they would say, Jesus, this guy must really hate white people. And I remember just cracking up. And there was one time where where they were like, who would do this? And I was like, yeah, I wrote that. And they were like, no, you didn't. And I started reciting the lyrics. And they were like, wow, you have problems. And I'm like, yeah, all right. You got me. Like, what am I going to, how am I going to answer that?
You never really get away with that shit now. They fucking throw you in jail for fucking making a threat against the school or some shit if you wrote that nowadays.
Oh, I know. I was just I was just a troublemaking child, and I did very stupid things. And
yeah.
But then again, I would go home and watch Monty Python, so I knew I was a weirdo. But yeah, I really enjoyed Kill All the White People. It was my favorite Typo Negative song for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I want to say that they probably got the inspiration for those lyrics not only because it was very silly and tongue in cheek and absurd, which were a lot of Typo Negative songs. A lot of them are freaking hilarious, especially if you go back to the double meanings. But there was a Saturday Night Live sketch where it's Eddie Murphy, and it's like a reggae group, and they're and they're trying to do this like this happy island music for all these people, and it's like, and they're having a good time or whatever, and like it's a good, and it's like a very, it's a standard reggae song, and the lyrics are "until we killed the white people," and it's this celebration, and like all the tourists are like, wait, they said what? And like it's very funny. I would like to think that it came from that the idea that the inspiration for that song came from that sketch.
Yeah. I mean, knowing Peter Steele, it probably did.
It probably did. But yeah, there was that song. I also liked how they would slow things down and speed things up in the same, like throughout the same song, and like it would go from like fast to very, very slow, and I always thought that it was so weird.
Yeah,
that they would do that, and I thought it was, and I always liked how they do that. And as I've gotten into doom metal, well, it makes perfect sense. And I really like how they had such a huge sound.
Yeah.
We Hate Everyone. That's the other song that I really liked, and they were both the faster songs on Bloody Kisses, and I was drawn to those, not only because of how absurd they were, but also just in general that they were faster. But they had a good groove to them too, because they weren't too fast.
Yeah.
But like I said, the lyrics can be very absurd. And for example, the song "A Death in the Family," like it's this slow, ominous, sad tune, but it's about him grieving over his cat.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of funny.
Yeah. I like that, or you had mentioned their like sound and like how they have a really big sound and stuff, and actually, and I could really hear that influence in your like bass playing, because Peter Steele was very much like he played bass, but it was more of like a rhythm guitar, because he had like a really heavy distortion on it, and like played along, and like almost was like Lemmy, kind of like Lemmy had that same kind of like playing, using the bass as a rhythm guitar rather than a bass, and you kind of like had that style too, so it's like very clearly influenced Zamboni and Nuclear Hatred, the way we played. And I mean,
the further deep let me do a pun. This is a bad one. The slower, deeper, and harder that I got into Typo Negative and Carnivore, the more it influenced my bass playing.
Yeah.
Because I also appreciate how when it slows down, there's a long slide.
Yeah.
In everything, and I like how they really hold the notes and they let them ring out as they're playing, and I like their use of slides just in general, where like they strike a chord and they really like drag it down with it.
Yeah,
because it helps pull you back into the music even further. I've always liked that, and he did that with Carnivore too. That's just kind of Pete's signature style.
So, when I first got into them, was like I said, right around, it was early 2010, and I was actually like, I really wanted to like go see Carnivore, which they had just like reformed around that time, and they were like planning on doing, I think, a tour.
They did a small one.
Yeah. And then, of course, Peter Steele passed away, unfortunately. And I was like devastated.
I will forever kick myself for going to the wrong show that Halloween.
I was so mad because I like was literally just getting into them, and I was like, these guys are so good. I can't wait to see them live. And then literally like a month later, he died. And so now I'm going to like, let me tell this story about the curse of Lord Petrus.
Yes, now, that's what we were getting to.
Seemed to be the like starting point. So when we started Zamboni, you had come up with the idea to have an undead Peter Steele as our mascot. And it was going to be Zamboni Pete, and he was going to be like a skeleton head, and it was going to be basically just Peter Steele with like a skull face, and he was going to drive a Zamboni, and that was the whole thing.
And wear a hockey jersey.
Yeah, and wear a hockey jersey. Well, the original design, he had a leather jacket.
Yes,
though, so
he
looked
did.
really much like Peter Steele.
And he had long hair. Peter did not take kindly to this.
No. After Peter Steele died, he came back and cursed us. And this was the curse of Lord Petrus. So basically, every time we met and to like rehearse or do anything,
any major event, if we were rehearsing for a show, it wasn't just a regular rehearsal. Sometimes the first couple it was, but it was a regular rehearsal.
Yeah.
If it was for a show, like if it was a regular rehearsal, it usually went fine. If it was for a show,
something wrong happened.
Something bad happened when we were recording the album. Something bad happened. If we were doing a barbecue show, not always, but the first one, something bad happened.
Yeah, and the last one, it rained really bad on the last one.
And the last one, but everyone who was, but we still had a good turnout because they were like, "Oh, didn't this happen the first time?" So it didn't matter.
Yeah,
but yes, we did have to make some emergency precautions.
But yeah, so
and build a stage that possibly could have killed someone anyway.
Well, yeah. This curse was like persistent, and like it would be like really messed up, like bad stuff. Like we were gonna play a show at the Meat Locker, and we were like ready to go. We were raring to go. Like it was gonna be a really good show, and our drummer at the time found out that his grandmother was in the hospital and was possibly not coming out of the hospital. So I think actually ended up dying like later on. So he had to leave. Like he couldn't play.
No, that was the album. That was the album and the barbecue. Are you talking about Roger or Nathan?
Yeah. No, Roger.
No, Roger was the album.
It happened twice because we were playing a show at the Meat Locker and something like similar happened.
Oh, was that the Cancer Slug show?
Yes. The Cancer Slug show because Mitch played.
The Cancer Slug show. Yes, that's right, because Mitch played. And that was the biggest show that we had done as a band, as that band, and we still had fun and had a good time and did well.
Oh no! Okay, so the album was when his grandmother was in the hospital.
She passed away.
Yeah, no, the
and we actually never saw him again after that.
No, we didn't. He just disappeared, and we never heard from him again.
Oh boy!
The Meat Locker show was when he was like. He was with his friend in Connecticut. Like I forget what they were doing.
That's right. And his
like,
friend,
the van broke down or some shit.
No,
like,
someone broke into. No, someone broke into the van, and they stole They stole either the car battery or something else.
Yeah, so they were
something bad happened there. Because his friend lived in a rough part of Connecticut.
Yeah.
So something messed up.
That was the
car. Yes, that was that one.
So. That kind of shit would happen literally all the time until and then we finally changed the design of the mascot because like we were so paranoid about this, and I'm like Chris and I were both like, we got to do something because there's clearly like Peter Steele is pissed off.
Yeah, we thought about changing the name of the mascot, and then we changed the design of the mascot, and things subsided for a while, and then like. Right after the album comes out, of course,
then
we get hit with the cease and desist, and we were like, "Oh, okay, this is the big one."
Yeah, that was like the ultimate. Like that was his final, like hurrah! Like
just like, please stop it.
Yeah. So
it was like if you won't kill the band, I will.
And so here's the thing, though, is that we were making fun of Peter Steele with Zamboni Pete. We were doing it as like an homage to him, We weren't like trying to like
it wasn't mean.
Disparage him. No,
all the songs that involved Zamboni Pete, which were very few, possibly only one or two of them.
Yeah, I think it was only one. It was the title track.
It was just him destroying people. It was him doing what he loved with the Zamboni.
Yeah.
What's more American than that? Running people over with a Canadian object or with an object built for Canadian sports. I'm not sure. What's more American than taking something beautiful and using it to just commit homicide?
Yep.
It's actually probably the most patriotic thing you could do if it was the 1700s. I'm trying to be legally diplomatic here.
Legally
diplomatic, if there is such a thing. But, yeah, I always loved Typo Negative's writing style and Carnivore's writing style. I mean, it's the same thing.
It's very
basically.
tongue in cheek. Yeah,
yes, very tongue in cheek. Very offensive. Well, Carnivore more offensive than Typo.
Typo had some offensive songs, but not as bad as
Carnivore.
No, Carnivore literally had a song called Jesus Hitler.
Yeah, Jesus Hitler, male supremacy. Which one of our friends, this guy Rob, who used to play in the band Bomb Scare, he when he was in college, he wrangled people in from his college and taught them this song, and they played it and they played it to like a group of feminists.
Oh God!
Because of course they did. Yeah, but there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek jokes.
Yeah. Angry Neurotic Catholics.
Yeah. Angry
SMD,
Neurotic Catholics.
Which of course stands for Suck My Dick.
Yep.
Race War.
Yeah, just all of these ridiculous things.
Yeah.
And were part of Carnivore. Carnivore had 2 records. So the funny thing about Typo Negative was Typo Negative stemmed from the ashes of Carnivore.
Yes.
So Carnivore was originally a band called Fallout, and I think they only had one. I think they only had like one demo, and then then it became Carnivore. And Peter was like, he just had so many ideas. He was changing a ton of things.
Yeah.
Like including members and things, because he had like a specific vision for it, like a Mad Max costumes and things like that they would do, and they would like drink fake blood on stage and whatever. They would do all these like barbaric things simply because, and that was the spirit of what he was going for. Carnivore gets a deal with Roadrunner Records. They release the first album, which I think is.
Carnivore.
It's just self-titled, but other people have just called it Predator. I'm pretty sure that it is just self-titled. Predator is just a song on there.
Yeah.
Then you have Retaliation, which is the more well-known one.
Yes.
Carnivore ends up breaking up, but they had the way that the record labels had worked was the way that record deals worked back then as the standard. You still see it sometimes. Is a band would sign for a multi-album deal right off the bat with however much money was the downside and everything. The standard was about 3 albums. Sometimes you'd get an unheard of deal. Like when Slipknot had signed to Roadrunner and they had like an 8 or 9 album deal, and like a ridiculous signing bonus, which at the time, which was pretty unheard of at the time, especially for metal. But that's another story for another day. This is not a Slipknot episode. We probably will have one at some point down the line because that is a pretty wacky band, whether you like them or not. Carnivore breaks up shortly after Retaliation. Peter Steele forms a new band called Repulsion, but there is a grind band called Repulsion that, grind death metal, whatever you want to call it, who is the more well-known one and plays at Maryland Death Fest pretty often. They already exist, so you can't. So you're just like, all right, well, I can't do that. There's already a Repulsion; they're already good. So I can't do that. He then named the band Sub-Zero. And he got this tattoo that he drew up, which became the Typo Negative symbol, and he decided, and Sub-Zero just wasn't going to work. I think there was another band called Sub-Zero on Roadrunner's label. So what I'm getting at is he signed a standard record deal. Now, at the time, he still was working for the Parks Department in New York City because that was his regular job. He just happened to be in a band that was signed to a major label at the time because they weren't touring, so he could still work and build up the overtime and everything. He signs this 3-album deal releases 2 with Carnivore. His name is still on the line. He's got a new band. He does this tattoo and everything, and he's like, hey, what about this thing Sub-Zero? He goes and gets the tattoo and everything, and then he's like, hey, he goes up to Monty Connor or whoever it is. Monty Connor was the founder and runner of Roadrunner, but I don't know if he was the main guy that he spoke with at the time. But he was like, hey, I got this idea. He still owes that. Basically, his name is still on the dotted line. He still owes them an album. So if he joins another band, that band is automatically signed to Roadrunner to complete that contract. Mm-hmm. Unless Roadrunner then decided to do a best of or something, which you can't really do with 2 albums, to do a compilation of some kind to recoup your losses.
Not really.
Which you couldn't really do, and you couldn't really do that with Carnivore because it didn't sell enough to even warrant that.
Yeah.
So they're like, all right, well, he's like, this is my new band. It's called Sub-Zero. And they're like, well, that's nice. We already have a band called Sub-Zero. And he's like, damn it. So he had to change the name, and he's looking at the tattoo, and they're just thinking of things, and of course it then becomes Typo Negative.
Yeah.
And the first album, Slow, Deep, and Hard, was just a lot of leftover Carnivore material, which is why it sounds nothing like any of the other Typo Negative albums, or at least a very primitive version of Typo. It's kind of that middle ground between Carnivore and what becomes Typo Negative. And Typo then goes on to make their music. They recorded quite a few albums before they really got a break. He did Slow, Deep, and Hard, Origin of the Feces, which was a fake live album that they did that was part of just really a way to, like, Slow, Deep, and Hard ended up working well enough where they had signed an extension. So they ended up doing that. And yeah. So they ended up doing that. They ended up going out there. And Peter, when he signed the Typo Negative contract, because of course you have to draw up a new contract and everything for the new band, because even though Peter Steele owes you 1 album, he owed it to you with Carnivore, so you have to draw up a new one where now it's not Carnivore, it's Typo Negative, so that it's like a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo, which did we mention we hate, unless it's Larry and Steve, who are stand-up gentlemen. He signs it with a combo of hair conditioner, chocolate syrup, and food dye, so it looks like he signed his contract in blood, but a lot of people believe that he signed it with blood and semen, which, if you knew Peter Steele, he was more of a practical joker than actually doing silly things like that, but he liked the shock value, so there you go. But yeah, they do Slow, Deep, and Hard. They do Origin of the Feces, which is the fake live album, which has the Hey Joe cover by Jimi Hendrix, except they changed the lyrics to Hey Peter, and they changed the lyrics to, instead of they changed the lyrics to various things that have nothing to do with the original song, where for example, mentioning that he's going to take the D train down to Brighton Beach in Bay 7th and kill his woman. Which at the time the D train did go there. The B and the Q now go there. But it's just interesting. I mean, if you know the landscape of the MTA trains, it's kind of funny to know that. But it's an interesting tidbit that really dates the song in a fun way, and you're just kind of like, oh yeah, it did go to that. The D train did go there. But yeah, but this would set the base for what Typo Negative's lyrical content would be, or Carnivore's was a lot more barbaric and just really just randomized like violence and just like an equal opportunity offender.
Yeah.
Typo Negative was a lot more about, heartbreak, loss, breakups and suicide, and just really, it took a darker path. But there was also plenty of tongue-in-cheek humor woven in, where it was kind of like, as dark as it was, the songs also made a point to say, all right, it's not really that bad.
Yeah.
So it was, I thought that it was interesting how that's kind of the overarching theme is it sucks, but it's like life sucks, but it's not that bad at the same time. And, it helped a lot of people, just in like darker times, myself included. But I will say that the first two albums, Slow, Deep, and Hard and Origin of the Feces, the covers are interesting, to say the least. The album covers, Slow, Deep, and Hard it's something that the further away you look at it, you realize what it's a picture of, and the picture is a complete. It's a big joke that writes itself, based on if like you could take a wild guess at what Slow, Deep, and Hard's cover is, and if you zoom out far enough, you realize that it is in fact a close up of two people who may or may not love each other very much, having a very good time. And Origin of the Feces, the original, the cover for that one is just like the three skeletons doing the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. But the original art is a close-up of Peter Steele's butt. So, that is the tongue-in-cheek humor there, quite literally a tongue-in-cheek. If you're into that sort of thing. And Origin of the Feces, of course, being a parody of Darwin's Origin of the Species.
Yeah.
We then go to Bloody Kisses and October Rust, where Typo Negative ended up finding their commercial success with Bloody Kisses. And, God, I've run into so many people over the years that I'm so jealous of that got to see Typo Negative open for Pantera on the Bloody Kisses album tour.
Oh, yeah.
That was the tour to see both of those bands, because that's right when they were both, like, hitting their stride.
Yeah. The Bloody Kisses was when Peter Steele quit his job at the Parks Department.
Because the first couple of... Right, he finally had gotten... Well, it wasn't really the financial freedom, although I'm sure there was some... I'm sure he was making a decent living just on that. But, I mean, they all pretty much had jobs. But for years, Peter Steele was still working for the Parks Department, as we mentioned, and he really enjoyed that job, actually. And he had, when they had started touring after Bloody Kisses started to take off, because they were gaining real momentum, and they had put off touring for a while because they weren't really making the numbers, and I guess the label wasn't really bothering them that much because they had, it was Roadrunner. They were starting to become the giant that they are today, but so they had plenty of other bands that could go out and tour.
Yeah.
And Typo wasn't really that wasn't that big of a priority yet. And then Bloody Kisses takes off, and they're like, okay, you got to start doing that touring thing now. And they're like, okay, sure. But Peter Steele was still working for the Parks Department during Bloody Kisses because he would just work so much overtime that he would save up hours to where, like, they weren't touring frequently yet, but it was like 2 months here, 2 months there. And he had saved up enough time where he was double dipping, essentially. Like he was just basically on like a big paid vacation with his other job, while he was still being paid by the Parks Department because he had time off. And it was a pretty sweet deal for a while until eventually they were like, no, you got to go. Now we need you to tour for 6 months. Now we need you to tour way more. Like once, because after Bloody Kisses went like just skyrocketed, October Rust was even bigger and so forth and so on, where he had to quit after October Rust. I'm sure he probably would have been able to come back if he just decided to just like that he was just done with all of it. But they all, I mean, Kenny Hickey, I think he went back to it now, but he was a plumber. He was a plumber while he was while typo was starting to pick up, and I'm sure he went. I've heard that he went back to it, and he's just doing that again now, which is fine. Plumbers make very good living in the United States.
And bank.
Yeah, they really do. It's pretty nuts. So anytime you see that guy's butt hanging out in front of your sink, just think he's probably making more money than your dad.
Yeah.
Who is in an office. Who also went to college, where this guy just learned how to fix a pipe.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
Like making $1 a year doing it.
Probably is. Good for him. Hats off to you, plumber guy. But yeah, they all pretty much had to start doing their regular things, and then when they all just had typo full time. I guess on his downtime, Kenny Hickey probably could go back to plumbing like when they were off. I'm sure that wasn't. I'm sure he was fine no matter what. I don't know what the other guys did.
Well, I imagine Peter Steele.
Peter, I think, didn't do anything else. I think he just
kept writing music and doing music-related shit.
Yeah, I believe that was the case. I don't know what Josh Silver did. I think Josh Silver owned a recording studio at the time, actually. So he would come back and he would just start producing bands and everything. Yeah. It was called Sty in the Sky. That's what it was.
Huh.
One of my old managers at Sam Ash used to have a Black Sabbath cover band that used to rehearse there, and they would just like hang out with him. But I don't know what Kenny Hickey did. I don't know what Johnny Kelly did. I guess he just did a bunch of odd jobs, but also he was a drummer, so he probably had work somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Like somebody else would probably borrow him for a tour or something like that. I mean, he plays in Danzig now, and he has for many years.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. If you're going to be a musician, you should probably be a drummer because you'll never run out of work. That's words to the wise, kids. But yeah, they ended up getting into the just being mega stars, and it was difficult for Peter to really cope with that. I mean, all of them, I'm sure, to a degree, but him more than ever, because he was, not only was he the focal point of the band, being the singer and the bass player and the main songwriter, but he's 6'7" or 6'8" or whatever he was. He was a giant.
Yeah, he was.
So it's hard to not spot him in a crowd, even if he's not famous. But you have that on top of it where people instantaneously know who you are, and it's hard to get away from people, and then, there's all the other things that come with it, and that whole band fell into a lot of those pitfalls that you get into. Drug use was a big issue with them. From what I've been told and what I've read, they were all, or mostly all of them were heavy cocaine users.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
No. Well, I mean, it could have been worse. The 90s was the fucking heroin times, and so many bands in that time were like friggin' killing themselves with heroin. So, I mean, cocaine's still not great, but compared to the alternative, I guess it's more acceptable. I
suppose
they just wanted to have a good time. It wasn't like they were fucking like trying to like suppress their fucking depression with opiates.
Right. I mean, I suppose, because I mean, if you just talk to just a regular person, if you and you're mentioning certain drugs, if you if you tell them, like, there's certain drugs that you mention where people react a little bit more favorably toward it, or if that's really the right word, where they're
less taboo.
Less taboo might be the right term. Where some will, and like there's some that get shunned, like heroin, and rightfully so, and there's and crack, rightfully so, and then there's others like pot and cocaine, which pot now gets a pass because it's legalized just about everywhere now, or at least it's legalized in enough places where nobody cares.
It's effectively, even if the places that it's not legalized, it's effectively decriminalized, basically.
Yes. But cocaine has gotten cocaine gets a mixed reaction, and also there's a weird aura around that one where
I think cocaine is like the borderline drug between hard drugs and soft drugs, and that's why. So like, if you say like soft drugs, I
wouldn't call it a soft drug.
Well, no. It's like on the borderline because like it's somewhat acceptable. Like a lot more people do cocaine than other hard drugs. But
you'll hear about that one more often.
A lot of people that do drugs that they'll have a mentality like I'll only do drugs that like are grown naturally. So like they'll only do like psychedelics and pot, right? And then, like, there's people that are like, okay, I'll do, like, psychedelics, pot, and then sometimes do cocaine, like, kind of thing. And it's, like, right on the borderline there of, like, hard drugs, If you're going to say hard drugs, anything that's, like, super, like, addictive and manufactured, like cocaine, heroin, LSD, that kind of thing, then cocaine is kind of, like, right on that border. Because there are some people that still do cocaine. And, like, cocaine, it does technically come from a plant. It's just like super refined,
Yeah, I've actually been watching Narcos this last couple of weeks. So I've been watching the Escobar season, and I mean that's the best one anyway. But I'm learning a lot of Spanish, and I'm also learning a lot about that sort of thing. So well, at least I'm learning Spanish, but I'm not really learning the nicest terms.
It's starting to become more taboo again, though, because they're using like fentanyl to cut cocaine, and it's killing people. So it's starting to become like dangerous. It's not like like the '80s where you get fucking pure fucking Colombian fucking like 100% pure Colombian cocaine that was like like nothing was in it. It was like where they if they cut it with like baby powder, so it was like harmless.
Yeah.
Now it's like they're fucking cutting it with fentanyl, and like there was actually a house party or a college party or something like close to like it was like in upstate New York, but like down close to here, so like lower, I guess, downstate New York is what you could call it, like the Hudson Valley. And I had read about it in the newspaper that someone had brought cocaine to the party, ended up being laced with fentanyl. So all the people that did the coke OD'd because it had fentanyl in it, and then like the people that were trying to like revive them with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation OD'd.
Oh, Jesus!
Just from like putting their mouth on the person who had OD'd on fentanyl. So it's like,
holy crap!
It's fucking scary.
That is really messed up.
But I digress. Anyway, that's why it's becoming more taboo again because of that, and more dangerous. But like back in the 90s when these guys were doing it, it was kind of like that borderline, like, it's kind of a hard drug, but like it's more acceptable.
It was kind of because you would see it. You'd only see certain people doing that one.
Well, cocaine was
it's still kind of that, but like cocaine was like it was the party drug.
Yeah, especially in the 80s, it was like the rich businessman drug.
Yes,
like all like the freaking businessmen were all coked out, like freaking like
all the Wall Streeters. Just imagine these were the people that you were entrusting with your money, and not a small pen, and not some of it, all of it, or like millions and millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars, and all of them were just out of their mind on cocaine.
Well, the sad thing is because
crazy.
They were like working so much. They'd be working like 16-hour days, so they basically had to do cocaine to stay awake.
Oh yeah, well you see that a lot in kitchens too.
Yeah.
You see it all the time in restaurants. That's like stuff goes in and out of those kitchens like crazy. I ought to know. I worked in quite a few kitchens in college.
Yeah.
I did not partake in any of these festivities, but I saw quite a bit, and I did not like it.
Yeah.
It's unsettling to know this is where I make the chicken parm. Or, oh, you're doing that on that table. That's nice.
Well, I think 99% of people, if they saw what goes on in a kitchen,
they'd never go. All restaurants would close immediately.
Exactly.
If people knew what went on in kitchens.
Yeah.
Just because the restaurant in 5 stars, it doesn't mean that shenanigans don't happen.
Everyone thinks it's like fucking as clean as an operating room.
Oh no!
Oh
no!
Little did you know.
Oh no! The restaurants that have C's, D's, and F's and have to restructure and everything, those are the ones that got caught.
Yeah.
You have to see what some of these A restaurants have.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Peter Steele. The cocaine did take on him.
Yes, it eventually caught up with him, and that's probably what killed him. I mean, you're 8. Yeah. You're almost 8 feet tall. You're almost 7 feet tall. Your heart, all of your organs are already larger than the average person, so you're going to have an enlarged heart naturally, and that's gonna and people who are very tall do not historically live that long anyway, just because there's more blood to pump.
Well, and it's interesting because initially it was reported that he had died of heart failure. Apparently, he actually had diverticulitis and sepsis, which, again, being a musician and touring, you don't take care of your body, and this is plagued so many musicians over the years, and it's like Joey Ramone is a perfect example. Like, he was constantly sick and never took care of his body because they were just constantly touring the Ramones. And then eventually he had fucking cancer and he died. And that has happened to so many musicians that they just don't take care of themselves because their craft, they're too busy honing their craft and doing their art, and then they forget about themselves completely and they end up dying at an early age. So if they're not partying themselves to death, with drugs or alcohol, then they're dying of other health issues. Which I think is it's a combination here with Peter Steele. He had stopped the partying and doing so much drugs and alcohol.
He actually had moved to Pennsylvania.
Oh, really? I didn't.
Yeah, at the time. Okay, so just to go back a little bit, we have Bloody Kisses, we have October Rust, we have World Coming Down. All of those albums are incredible. We have Life Is Killing Me, which has a really fun cover of Angry Inch from the play Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Typo is on a non-stop roller coaster ride, and they're also, throughout this time, they're also having a lot of troubles, probably some partially internally with the band, but mostly it's just the record label. God knows how much money Roadrunner robbed from them over the years, and all of the subsequent bands on them. I mean, this is the unfortunate side with the music industry, is the label is only looking out for the label, and the label will always present you with such a one-sided contract where laws and royalty fees and royalty dues and everything that you will get, it is so one-sided. It has not been updated since the 1950s when they were first introduced, where we've said this before, it is very, very, very difficult to make a living being a musician on a major label. And let that sink in. Also, any amount of money that goes into the album, or your downside bonus, or any of that is all woven into the contract, where it is the label giving you money, and you've loaned it out to the label with interest. So all of the money you think you have is not yours. All of the things that you think you have are not yours. It's all in debt to the label if the label bought it for you. If the label said, "Hey, you know what would you should really work on your image. Go buy a Ferrari. You didn't get a free Ferrari. It's the label's Ferrari that you owe money to pay them on.
Yeah.
So we've said this before, but we probably don't say it enough. Own your masters. That is the only way where you will definitely make the most money. I can't promise you that you will make a lot of money, but you'll make the most money off of your music if you own your masters.
Well, you'll get to keep all the money.
You'll get to keep it, for sure. You won't owe it to anyone, but that's to get back into it. That's another story for another time. We could stay on this forever. And we probably will at some point in time when we have nothing else to talk about. But we have all of these typo albums, and they're sick of the label. They're done with the label. They're getting out of the contract. So they ended up getting out of the contract. They owed them an album, and they just did a compilation album. That word that we used before with Carnivore that they didn't have enough material to use, they now did, and some leftover stuff, like the really cool cover of Highway Star by Deep Purple is on there, and which Typo did not authorize. That they actually had said, don't buy it, because we have nothing to do with it and we're not going to make any money from it. This is just what we did to get out of the contract. And they did eventually do they did eventually get out of the contract, and they signed with SPV Records, and they released their last album, Dead Again. And it was a really great album to go out on. Mm-hmm. Sadly, it was the last album, and a little after that, Carnivore had gotten back together. They did a really successful tours. They did a successful European tour. They did a successful North American tour. In smaller clubs, and in Europe, it was in bigger places, like in Hamburg, where the Beatles played, which was very cool. When I spoke to Paul Bento about it, he was raving about how happy he was that he was able to actually play in the same venue that the Beatles had played in Hamburg, and he never thought that would happen. Mm-hmm. And they had so many ideas for what would have been the third Carnivore album, because they were starting to write it, and they were going to do all these things that could never happen before, that had never really been done. And they were going to get a lot more experimental. They were going to do something with tubular lights or something like that, and like sound refractions. And they were going to do a lot of wacky ambient things and play off of that. And Paul Bento is extremely. He's like a fly under the radar guy of how good he is at guitar. He's also a great sound engineer too. But he's a very talented musician. He also has this crazy technique that he has various techniques that only he could do, and I'm proud to say that he's also a lefty. But he has this technique where he can rattle the tubes of an amplifier, with his vibrato.
Huh.
Yeah, you could see them flicker. It's really cool. It's a really wild technique, and he's barely doing anything. But he's figured out a way. He's also like a Reiki master, which is pretty cool. Anyway, they had a lot of really great ideas that they were going to do for the third Carnivore album, and then and Peter had moved. He had after his mom had passed, and I think one of his sisters had passed. He just decided that he wanted to leave New York. He wanted to get some peace and quiet. He was dealing with with other things, and he just needed to get out. So he bought a house in Pennsylvania, and he moved. And he was there for he was there for maybe like a year or two, and he wanted to move back. And he just kind of needed a clean slate. And he was getting ideas for the next Typo album, and he started writing the next Typo album. And he was planning to move back to New York because they had gone on a very short hiatus. and he ended up finally, coming to peace with things, and he just kind of gave out, which, he just died pretty unexpectedly.
Yeah. It was very unexpected, and across the music world, it kind of like reverberated hugely.
It shook quite a bit. I mean, it was only a month before Ronnie James Dio went too.
Yeah.
Which, we lost two really great ones in a very quick amount of time, and it really sucked.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, with Dio, everybody knew that he was battling stomach cancer, so everybody knew that he was likely not to be coming out on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And he was already an old man, and he had already, lived a very full life, which I would say Peter lived a very full life too, but he was not old. Peter was only 48 when he passed.
Yeah.
He had a lot more in him. I believe that he had a lot more in him. I think had he not been into drugs, he definitely would have stuck around a bit longer. I'm not sure if it would have been the same amount of time. I'm not sure if it would have been significantly longer, but I think he would have at least made 55, 60.
Yeah.
But yeah, and as I said before, I went to the wrong show the previous Halloween on the backwards belief. So I had always wanted to see the Misfits. I was big into the Misfits. I still am big into the Misfits. I don't want to see them with Danzig. I've seen the Misfits separately. I've seen Danzig separately. I'm happy enough where I don't need to see the Misfits with Danzig.
Yeah.
That said, I finally went to go see the Misfits. I saw them on Halloween. I believe it's the only time that I got to see them. I still have my Land of the Dead EP that's signed by Jerry Only with a Sharpie that was on its last leg. So I'm not even sure if you could even read it anymore or tell that it's a signature, and it might even just be a smudge at this point.
Yeah.
But that was a very good night. We were nice and drunk. I was dressed as King Diamond. I think my glasses broke again. I don't remember. Every time I went into the mosh pit for like a while, until I basically stopped going into a mosh pit, my glasses would break or I'd lose my glasses or something. It was just, no matter what I did, no matter how well I tried to protect them, no matter if I wrapped it in stuck it to me with band it and taped it to myself like it was a bomb of some kind, my glasses still found a way to come off and get lost or broken. So it didn't matter what I had. Maybe I should have used a better analogy than like a suicide bombing, but I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't think of anything at the time, so I'm sorry. But yeah, my glasses would never pop off. Anyway, I had not yet been fully fledged into type O negative at the time. Within the next 6 months, I think over the winter time, I really did. And of course, that very night across the street, this was at BB King's, the Misfits show, which BB King's doesn't exist anymore. I don't even know what the hell it is, but I mean, after BB King passed away,
good.
After BB King's passed away, you kind of knew that they weren't going to keep that around, and it had been losing money for a while, unfortunately. But what was across the street that evening, you ask? Over at the then Nokia Theater?
What?
Type O Negative was playing on Halloween like they also did every year.
Yeah.
I did not realize that. My friend Johnny went to that show. He also met them because his brother took guitar lessons from Paul, and Paul went and Paul was there, obviously. So Paul like got them in backstage and whatever, and they hung out for a little bit. Johnny's recollection of Peter Steele is quiet, pretty funny guy. Said a lot of dick jokes. Yeah, his words are a lot of dick jokes. He does still have a picture of his pedal board, and Typo Negative's pedal board was pretty much exclusively Boss pedals from like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like a plain Jane Boss DS1 distortion, Boss chorus, Boss delay, a compressor, and that was about it. Maybe one or two, like maybe there might have been one or two backup pedals, but it was a very basic sound.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it was a basic sound. It was a huge sound. It was a very thick sound, but just a very standard guitar pedal chain that he ran it through. They were all guitar pedals, not bass pedals, by the way. And he just ran it through like a half stack and a bass amp. I think he played Randall's at the time. But yeah, Randall's were very, very good, and Randall's was like probably the top metal. It was probably the top metal amp that you could get in like the late 90s, early 2000s until they closed.
Yeah.
And then it would have been Crank, but then Dimebag Darrell passed away, and Crank amplification didn't really have anything else to help sell it because they were a fledgling company, and that kind of they went shortly after. A lot of people like Black Star now and Angle. I prefer Angle, but
Orange is a pretty big.
Orange I've always loved. Orange has never not been a great amp.
Yeah, I like Orange amps too. I wish I could afford one.
I don't live anywhere where I could use it, where I could play it or use it. I mean, I live in an apartment, so I can't really. But whenever we get the next place, if it is a house with a garage or something, then I will, or at least a basement. I will do my best to get some Orange cabs in there.
Yeah.
But I do say but a lot. That's not good.
And you do it again.
I'm trying to think. I didn't go to the Typo Negative show, and I wish that I have. That's the single biggest regret that I didn't know would be a regret in my entire life. I wish that I had gone to that show instead, because guess who is still alive next year? The Misfits. So I could have gone the following year.
Yeah, but that was my thing. Like, so I
could have gotten my cake and eaten it too, but I thought that the Misfits were likely to die first, which was not the case. So, of course, 6 months later, when I'm really into Typo Negative, I wake up to find that Peter Steele had passed away, and I am all kinds of what the hell is going on.
Yeah, that fucked me up. And then, so when Peter Steele died, I'm like, well, shit. Well, I have to really go see Dio before he dies now, and he literally died like a month later.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, that fucking is a double fucking whammy.
Yeah, I do remember that. And then I had just said, well, I'm glad I got to see him. You were like, well, fuck you, that doesn't help me.
Yeah. I actually, our friend Roberto, we might have mentioned on the show before, but like he's actually the one that like introduced me and Chris. So like he's like,
Roberto takes all the credit for this podcast existing. We'll have to get him on the show at some point.
Eventually, we'll have to. Yeah, this would have been a good episode to have him on.
It would have been.
But he actually gave me, because he went to. They did that. Remember when? So they had the tour with Black Sabbath, except it was like the Dio version of Black Sabbath.
Yeah, that's the one that I went to, the Metal Masters one, where it was Testament, Motorhead,
and they played at Radio
Judas
City,
Priest.
Right?
No, that was a different show.
Well, this is the Radio City one, because Roberto went to the Radio City show.
Yeah, I think that's the one where they shot the DVD.
Yeah. Yes. And so he and this was like they didn't play as Black Sabbath, they played as Heaven and Hell because there was some legal bullshit, so they couldn't legally play as Black Sabbath. But whatever. So he got like a promo CD of that show, and it was like basically just the live tracks from that show. So I actually have that. I have that CD somewhere still because he gave it to me, and because he wasn't like super into like the Dio Black Sabbath, so he's like, "Here, if you want this, you could have it."
Yeah, I
So
remember I remember him like talking about it. And he was like, I really wasn't that into it, but it was nice to say I saw Black Sabbath, so I went.
Yeah,
and it was like, okay.
Well, that's why when they did the reunion tour with Ozzy a couple of years ago, I was like, I'm fucking going to this no matter what, because I'm not gonna miss that on this, and then fucking Ozzy's gonna die next. And
we conveniently were both at that show, and we conveniently found out that we inadvertently bought seats right next to each other.
Did we? Was that? Yeah, it was like you were like one row away, but like right in front of me or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there were just like blanks. There were like 2 open seats or something. Yeah. So you just came down, and just sat in the same row.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Happened. That happened at the Iron Maiden show when we saw Iron Maiden with Alice Cooper.
Yeah, except me. I was the only one who didn't have who wasn't in the same section as you guys by accident. Yeah. I was with some weird old guy.
Yeah, I didn't even buy together with like Ian or anybody else, and we just happened to be sitting next to each other somehow by some miracle.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny.
Yes, I was very incapacitated.
That was a good show, though.
I know, but I really wish that I wasn't. I really wish that I had been sober for that one. Yeah, I had some apple pie moonshine in the parking lot.
Oh,
and I partook in activities that may or may not be legal in whatever part of town you're in. This was about 10 years ago. God, it's been 10 years ago.
It was not legal at that point.
At that point, in certain parts of the world it was, but very few. Not in America.
Yeah. No.
We'll tell you that. I was a rowdy college chap, if you some might say. But I do. Maiden's coming again in actually next Wednesday or Tuesday.
It's ridiculous how much they tour.
The Prudential Center it's a little too expensive. But they're playing on Long Island. They're playing on Long Island, and it's actually like $50. But you got to go to Long Island.
It's fucking bullshit.
I can't really get anybody to go with me, so I guess it's safe to say I'm not going. But I would like to see Iron Maiden one more time.
Yeah, it's fucking bullshit how expensive shows are. Like I went to the show last month. I saw Megadeth at PNC Bank Arts Center, and the tickets were listed as like $20 each or it was like $29.99 or some bullshit. And after all the fees and stuff, it ended up being like $80.
Yeah.
It's fucking ridiculous. It's bullshit.
Yeah,
and it's like, live music is dying. Well, yeah, because fucking Ticketmaster is killing it. That's why. Because they're literally stealing money from the American people.
Right. Yeah, I have tickets to Merciful Fate in a couple of weeks with Johnny, and I am very excited to go, but after fees, it was like $80.
It's fucking ridiculous. Like, how is anyone supposed to and it's like not like it's even going to the venue or the band. It's literally
it's just
like
going to Ticketmaster.
Exactly. It's like $30 for the ticket and $50 goes to Ticketmaster.
Right, or Live Nation or whatever. They all do the same thing.
It's the same thing. They're all fucking. I'm pretty sure Live Nation and Ticketmaster like own each other now, or like probably one owns the other. They combine. It's some fucking monopoly.
They have a similar structure, so it doesn't even matter. Even if they're independent, they have a similar structure.
I don't know how they didn't get fucking busted up in a fucking antitrust lawsuit by now.
Because the whoever runs the antitrust lawsuits do not care about the music industry. Otherwise, a lot of these issues that we've talked about in the music industry would have been resolved aeons ago. But the music industry is probably the lowest. It's probably last on the list of political to-dos.
Yeah.
Like, it's all these other, like, nonsensical things that they need to fix. And then there's the one thing that people would probably appreciate them start meddling in, and they're just not going to get to it probably ever, which is very sad.
Well, it's one of those things that the free market needs to correct itself, and people need to just stop fucking relying on Ticketmaster and Live Nation and say fuck you.
Yeah,
and open up their own venues and fucking do their own shows, and don't even fucking worry about Ticketmaster and Live Nation.
Yep.
On that note,
yes, very good. Let's listen to some Typo Negative and some Carnivore.
Right. So for anybody that's on Spreaker, if you want to listen to this part, go watch us on YouTube.
Yes. You continue. You take it away.
Well, I was just going to say, because the Spreaker, that won't let us play any kind of copyrighted music, but YouTube doesn't give a shit. They just will demonetize the video, but who gives a fuck?
Yeah, we don't make money on this anyway, or at least not on YouTube. On Spreaker, on Spreaker, you can help us out by just sharing and liking and giving very nice reviews wherever you get your podcasts. Yes. I forgot to say that earlier, but if you're listening to this, you already know that. So just give us 5 stars or say something nice about it. We'll be back to our normal routine next time. We're just getting back into the swing of things. Yes, and if you're on YouTube, just like, comment, dislike, subscribe, whatever. Just do something. Anything that you do will bump us up will bump us up and get more views. Yeah, so it really doesn't make a difference what you do, as long as you pay some attention to our YouTube channel.
Yep.
Anyway. I suppose we should probably start with some Carnivore, and then you want to do 2 and 2 because Typo songs can be very long.
Yeah, let's do 2 Carnivore, 2 Typo.
Mm-hmm. All right. What do you want to do first?
Let's do World Wars 3 and 4.
Okay. Like we were saying before, they had such a layered sound, and it wasn't like, I know we've mostly talked about Peter Steele this whole time, which this was his band.
Exactly, but, and so was Carnivore.
Yeah, these were his bands. And while we were talking during the Carnivore video, which if you're listening on Spreaker, you didn't hear while we were talking about the Carnivore stuff. They did reform as Carnivore AD with members Louis Beto and Mark Pivanetti, who previously played on Retaliation, and they have a backup drummer too. They have another guy who helps out with drums, and they have this other guy who is obviously not Peter Steele, but he kind of looks like him, and he's kind of the main vocal duties. He sounds similar, but to me, it's not really, it's okay if it's, like for me, I'm fine with it being, a one-off thing and they pop up every now and then, but as, a full-functioning band, it's not really my thing. I wouldn't really go see it. If it was, a tribute, kind of, if it was, if it was a tribute band with the original members, I think I'd be a little more comfortable with that label, but having them, reband, just saying, hey, we're Carnivore, it's not really, I'm not crazy about that idea. But as we were saying, with the layered sound, it wasn't just Peter's bass that set the mood for everything. It was, and all the pedals maxed out, but it was such a thick, layered signature sound that you would instantaneously know that, oh, this is Typo Negative. And a lot, and you could say that about a lot of bands, but there's very few where you would say, "Oh, that's that's definitely Typo Negative."
Yeah. And it's actually going off of that point. I actually there's I have it was an Ozzy Osbourne compilation album, and it had rare songs that weren't on any of their albums, and one of them was "Pictures of Matchstick Men." Which was a cover of a 60s song by what was the original? And I forget the original band that did the song.
Didn't Peter do a guest spot on that?
Oh, all of Typo did. It was Typo Negative was Ozzy's backing band for that song.
Oh, that's cool.
And so when I first heard it, I was like, oh, okay. So originally it was by Status Quo. It was a psychedelic rock song. And Ozzy covered it for the Private Parts album, like the movie Howard Stern Private Parts.
Oh, okay.
It was on the soundtrack album.
I don't think I've heard that.
Yeah, it's actually really good, and you know right away it's Type O when it comes on. Like you immediately hear it. It's like, oh, that's Type O Negative, but then Ozzy's singing, so it's
that
interesting.
Must have sounded cool.
It's really good.
The thing was, it wasn't like, like I said, it wasn't just the bass, but Peter's voice, which was obviously a huge part of that band. But you also had you had Kenny Hickey, who has a very underrated guitar approach, where like he plays a lot of more like major sounding chords.
Yeah, it's a lot of like
there's a heavy Beatles influence in this too. This is like Black Sabbath meets the Beatles.
Yeah, which was
Type O Negative, and
Pete Steele's two biggest influences.
Yes, and you also have Johnny Kelly, who does a very tribal sounding drum. A lot of that was because they had programmed drums for various albums, and they had put a very heavily gated drum reverb on there because that's what Phil Collins used, and they loved how Phil Collins had gated reverb on his drums. So that was where they got that interesting drum sound that you hear. They originally had Sal Abruscato for the first couple of albums, and then he went on to play with, I think, Life of Agony. But they had you have the super gated drums. You have Kenny Hickey's interesting guitar melodies where he's playing the major chords over Peter's obviously more doomy sounding bass, but you also have the overtones being set by Josh Silver on the keyboards behind everybody. And that's really what gives Type O that ominous gothic vibe, is pretty much all the keys. Because he's not playing a whole lot of, he's not going crazy. He's playing a lot of different chord progressions that fit the bill exactly, and it puts it right into the space where it needs to be. So you're getting this lovely combination of major and minor keys working in harmony, and you don't really hear that a whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a unique sound, especially in like heavy metal, or that kind of like scales and all that in a lot of heavy metal music, except for glam metal, but that sucked.
Yeah, glam metal was pretty bad.
So it's definitely different, and it's good. It's like a good,
Yes, it's refreshing, and it gives you that. And like, I don't listen to really any gothic music. I just never got really that into it. I suppose the only other goth band that I would say that I liked is Nine Inch Nails, but they weren't really. I wouldn't totally even say that they were goth. I don't know, just like regular goth music wasn't really my thing, but Type O was about as deep as I would get, and they of course were the biggest goth band. But I would label them more a doom band than a gothic band, but it depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
But I think it created that perfect atmosphere for listening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely adored this music. And there's the book Soul on Fire, which is Peter Steele's biography. That's mired in a bit of controversy, and I wanted to get to this before we wrapped up. But I read the book. I liked the book. My old guitar teacher Stan Pillis was interviewed in it, so it was interesting to see him talking about the early days of Carnivore. I'm pretty sure Paul was interviewed in it too. And there was a handful of other people, and the book originally should have been better than it was. I believe the guy who wrote it, he was the former editor-in-chief of I want to say Metal Edge magazine, when that was still a magazine that has since folded, like many publications unfortunately did in the early 2000s, early to mid I would say around like 2000, well, around the time of the big crash in 2008, around that time when journalism really started to die.
Yeah.
You saw a lot of really good publications fold because they were just smaller. Metal Edge was one of them. He wrote it. He had what originally was the book, with interviews with the band members, his sister, Peter Steele's sisters, and everything. And for whatever reason, something happened, and the band and his sisters did not want any involvement in the book. So they retracted everything that they had said. All of these interviews just gone. So he had to work with what he had.
Yeah.
And he could not use any of their quotes or anything.
Did they give a reason for it?
I want to say they did, but I don't know for sure. Let me try to look into this. But I want to say that they just did not want to be involved. Like they just said, I want to say that they put out a generic statement where it was like, we wish to no longer be involved in this book. But I don't know. Let me see. Book controversy. It's called. So the book is called "Soul on Fire: The Life and Music of Peter Steele." I liked it, but the book could have and should have been a lot better about it. Oh, looks like somebody did something recent on this. All right, here's from 2014, from 8 years ago. On behalf of frontman Peter Steele Ratajik. That was his real last name. He's actually buried in the same cemetery as my grandfather, but I don't know exactly where it is. There is also a tree planted in his honor in... oh, God, what's the name of the park? It's in Prospect Park. It's on Prospect Park. It's on the other side. Grand Army Plaza, that's where it is. I have yet to find that tree, but I know it's there because there's a typo thing around it. Jeff Wagner's the name of the author for this book. Yep.
Because that's the park that he worked in when he was in the Parks Department, isn't it?
Yes. So here's what happened. It was, there was just a statement that was put out. It was, contrary to promises by the author to create a book representing the life of Peter Steele as the man and his music, the author's manuscript has included material that the family deems to be not only non-factual, but sensational, focusing on the controversy around his life and grossly distorting the truth, rather than about celebrating the man and his music as promised. For that reason, Peter's family, the estate, withdraws its involvement and no longer wishes to be associated with this project. So not sure what exactly happened there. But his family did not want to be involved. Johnny Kelly has a book too, apparently, called Louder Than Hell. I think. Let me see what this guy... Oh, this is theimportantnews.com. The previous website was Brave Words. Brave Words is a little bit more known. I don't know much about this other one, but it could be alright. But I believe the band also had pulled their info too, and I'm trying to find that one, but I'm not able to find it. But his family didn't want to be in it. I think shortly after that, the band had pulled themselves too. So I don't really know what it was. I think it had to do with I think it had to do with like drug use and just things like that, and that was why they were like, no, we're not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Here we go. Typo. Okay, Blabbermouth. Typo members not cooperating is the line here. Also, we have the Playgirl thing with Peter Steele, which that happened.
Yeah.
He was the first person to take a picture hard in that magazine, and that drew a different audience than he expected to come to the show, and then he wrote the song I Like Goyles. They also infused a lot of Brooklyn things into it unintentionally.
They listed the band listed themselves as backing vocals on Dead Again as the Benson Hoist Lesbian Choir.
Yes.
But you have to say it, Benson Hoist.
Yes, Benson Hoist.
New Jersey.
All right, yeah, here we go. Writing on the book's official Facebook page, Jeff Wagner, the author of the book, says, I am disappointed in the recent decision of the surviving typo negative members to not cooperate in the telling of his story. Between January and April, I established contact several times with each of them, despite emails and phone conversations which were cordial and, I thought, positive. They have made the decision for reasons still unclear. On the upside, more than 40 people have participated and shared thoughts. This article is from 2013, and shared thoughts, emotions, and recollections for this project. This includes people verifiably close to Peter, family, close friends, music industry figures, members of Fallout, Carnivore, and session musicians for Typo Negative. This book is being written in tribute to Peter, and it is going forward at full steam. Josh, Kenny, and Johnny have my contact information. The door is always open for them to take part, albeit prior to its release, currently scheduled for October 31st. I'd like to believe Peter is having a good laugh at all of us right now.
So they have their own curse of Lord Petrus.
I suppose they do. I suppose at the end of the day, he just wanted to be left alone.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I can respect that, and I can understand. Yeah. And that's fine. But did you have to destroy Zamboni over this?
Well,
sometimes we'll just never know these things.
Yeah.
And that's that. But I liked the book. I thought it was pretty good. And, it's getting a reprint. It should be getting a reprint right around now. And the Jeff Wagner also seems to have recently released a book called Destination Onward, the story of Fate's Warning. So there's that too. Very interesting. But yeah, that's about it.
And that's that.
Typo Negative, Carnivore, excellent bands. Please check them out. Please get into it. It was really cool to have been around people who of these people and have been friends with these people and have hung out with them and everything. Yeah. It's nice to. It's very interesting, and also I've crossed it's kind of fun to say that you've crossed paths with them. But that's that. I had a fun time. And enjoying them, and thanks for everybody checking us out and coming to the show and listening to it. We really meant a lot. It really means a lot back. Every time you listening to us.
Yes, we're sorry we've been gone for a while on our little hiatus, but we're back. We're hopefully going to get more regular content out again for you, everybody listening.
Yes, we're going to try to, like we said, we're going to try to cram as much October things as we can in the next couple of days so that we could get back on track. I mean, we've got quite a bit that we need to catch up on, and we promise that let's not promise anything, but we hope that we'll be all caught up in a matter of weeks and we'll have additional content. This has been I think this is our 70th episode, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. 30 to go to 100.
All right.
Something
Let's
good for our 100th
keep that
episode. Going. Well, I hope so. Although we'll probably just not remember, and it'll just be our 100th episode by accident.
Yeah, probably.
Probably. Most likely. But thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. This has been Why Does This Exist? I've been Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And remember, question everything.
Good night, everybody.